All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Driving on Sunshine. This is our first panel discussion this week with our virtual green tour. We're excited to have you here. My name is Lindsay Hardy. My pronouns are she and her. I am the program director of the Energy Challenge, which is a program of the Environmental Center. And today I'm joined by my colleague, Neil Baunsgard, who is all things EV expert, guru, enthusiast, who will be moderating and joining our panel today with our team of experts. I'm just going to start with a really quick overview of who the Environmental Center is, since we have a lot of folks here on the call today who might be new. The Environmental Center, at the Environmental Center, we work alongside people of all ages, local businesses, and elected officials to create and advocate for meaningful, lasting change that everyone can be proud of. And one of many examples of this work is the Green Tour. This year is our 20th annual Green Tour. One of our folks here on the call today has been involved in the Green Tour since, I believe, the first or second tour. We'll have to have Mike share that when he gets on later today. This has been a long time community effort, and it's really interesting and exciting to see this coming now to you in a new virtual format. So we have these live events all week. This week, you can see the full schedule on our website at envirocenter.org/tour. And we'll have all sorts of different topic areas, from electric vehicles to remodeling for efficiency and zero energy, reducing waste and ADUs and infill development. So we have a whole host of really fun topics that we hope you'll be able to join us for. So the actual tour this year is going to look a little bit different. We hope you'll still join us to check out our 10 sites for you to explore. We'll be launching the first of those sites today on our website later this afternoon. So you'll be able to get a sneak peek into some retrofits and remodeling projects that some of your neighbors have started over the last couple of years. And you'll be able to connect with the experts who made the projects happen, the homeowners who figured it all out, and have some really great conversation with folks. You'll also be able to vote for your favorite site on the Green Tour, the People's Choice Award, and that'll be up and running until October 31st. So you'll be able to check out all of those sites until that time. All right, and today I'd also like to get this event started with a land acknowledgement. This acknowledgement is a work in progress. Our team is in the process of engaging local Indigenous community members to ensure that this statement respectfully and accurately represents their experiences. We look forward to learning more and adjusting our land acknowledgement as needed, but we felt it was really important to have this conversation here today as we talk about homeownership. So in Bend, Oregon, we're on the traditional territory of the Northern Paiute, the Wasco, and the Warm Springs tribes, which now comprise the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs. Acknowledging territory shows respect for Indigenous peoples who called the land home before the arrival of settlers, and in many cases still call it home. It's important to recognize that we are simply guests on this land. As hosts of the Green Tour, we can't talk about home and property ownership without naming the impacts of colonialism. When Native people were displaced from their lands and forced to settle on reservations, tribal housing throughout the country became standardized with little regard for individual culture, region, climate, and materials. Through a complex history of U.S. government acts, policies, and funding, the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs still continue to navigate housing challenges related to poverty, overcrowding, maintenance, and high utility bills. We recognize the many barriers and oppressive systems that have disconnected Indigenous peoples from their ancestral homelands, leading to loss of tradition, identity, language, natural resources, and so much more. Homeownership is a privilege, and access to a safe and healthy built environment is not equal. Take the time to learn about the history of where you live, whose land you're on, and how you perpetuate ongoing colonialism. You can donate to the Warm Springs Community Action Team, an organization that empowers residents with skills to find, finance, purchase, and maintain a home. And if you would like any more information on that, you can text ACTION to this number here below. I'll also send it out in the chat so you all have some information about this as we continue this discussion today. Before we get too far along, I want to acknowledge that there are some great organizations and businesses who help make this work possible so that we can have these conversations in our community. And those include the Zero Energy Project, the City of Bend, and are sponsors of the Green Tour, including Energy Trust of Oregon, E2 Solar, Miller Lumber, Saginaw Sunset, and Earth Advantage. So what's in store for us today? I'm going to get out of the way and let these EV experts and advocates take over. We'll have a panel discussion with Bruce Sullivan from Base Zero, who happens to be a zero energy homeowner and Leaf driver, with Henry Abel from Pine Mountain Sports, who has a shop EV and also is an EV driver, and Mike Hewit from E2 Solar, who helps homeowners install charging stations, and they also use EVs for their business as well. You'll be able to live chat any of your questions in for community Q&A at the end of the discussion today. You can also chat those questions on Facebook too, and we'll get those all back to the panelists. All right, so I'm going to invite everybody to turn their videos on. We'll get Neil, our moderator, up and going here, and you all can take things away. Oh, and I forgot.
That's all right.
A sense of who's in the room today. I'll let Neil introduce this and take it from here.
Yeah, great. So we have a poll that just popped up for those of you that are on Zoom. And if you all that are on Zoom could start answering the questions. There's, I think, 4 questions on there. So we can get an idea of who is in the room to hopefully help with the questions and make sure that we're serving as much of the community as possible. So we'll leave that up for just a little bit longer. Looks like most of the folks are from Bend. We have a mix of different vehicle types that folks are driving, with some EV drivers, a fair number of people driving internal combustion cars, and almost everybody on the call has either a regular or electric bicycle. So I'm glad you saw that in there. I wanted that to be an option. And more than half, or about half, have solar. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end this and start with the panel. So welcome everybody. I want to go ahead and get started by thanking our panelists. We have Bruce Sullivan here as a homeowner, and he also runs a company called Base Zero. Henry Abel from Pine Mountain Sports, Mike Hewit from E2 Solar, and I figured it'd probably be best if all of you could introduce yourselves and get a little bit of a deeper introduction to tell us about yourself and your business or your home, and kind of how that has connected solar and electric vehicles. We'll dive into more details over time, but Bruce, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Okay, great. Well, in 2015, my wife and I, Robin, built a new home in Bend, and we had intended to make it a zero energy home. At the time, we didn't know that we had enough money to go all the way, so we kind of designed it as what we know as a zero energy ready home. And then it looked like, you know, through the course of construction, we were actually going to be able to afford the solar panels, so we went ahead and put those on there. Mike Hewit helped us out with the installation of the solar system. And we were in a little bit of a pinch, not only because of the cost, cost question. We weren't sure that we could afford it, but because we also had a very limited roof area. And so the energy model that was done as a part of the construction process actually we didn't have enough roof space to put all of the panels on that the energy model told us that we would need. And so that was a little bit of a concern. But as it turned out, we ended up generating more electricity than we used in the first couple of years, and started to, think about how we could use up that energy. And then so we ended up getting a used Leaf from the Nissan dealer here in Bend. Turned out that we traded in our Subaru and got a 2015 Leaf and got a little bit of money back. So that's how we kind of evolved into a kind of a zero energy house with a kind of town car. We use the Leaf just mostly around town, and it's worked out pretty well. So far, we're still kind of energy positive in the sense that the house produces all the energy that it needs for itself and for about 4,000 to 5,000 miles that we drive in the Leaf.
That's a great introduction. Henry, do you want to go next? And I also want to recognize with all of you that you all have both personal and professional experience on all of these fronts as well. So you can fill as many or wear as many hats as you'd like. Henry, do you want to give yourself an introduction?
Sure. Hey, my name is Henry Abel. I work at Pine Mountain Sports. We're a mountain bike and ski shop over on the west side of town. And we are, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, this was kind of a fun statistic, but I think it still holds, which is kind of a bummer, because I think that we're the only solar-powered bicycle shop in Oregon. But we have solar on our building. We also, I think that was added in 2015, and then within less than a year, we added electric shop vehicle. So our Pine Mobile, if you will. We have 2 shop vehicles. We're on our second electric Leaf. So we have a Nissan Leaf that we use for running all of our shop errands, for delivering bicycles. Our staff uses it to go to the hardware store and go get burritos as well. So our bike shop is solar powered. And the charging station out front has been kind of an interesting thing as a retailer. It's definitely something that brings people to our store. And then on a personal note, my wife drives a Nissan Leaf electric car. She's been commuting to Redmond in that car for about 6 years now. I think she's put 60,000 miles on that car. And then I ride an electric motorcycle and also have an interest in electric bicycles as well. So definitely electric vehicles of all kinds going on here. And yeah, our store is solar powered. So thanks for having me.
All right, go ahead, Mike.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Mike with E2 Solar. I spend a lot of my days working on electrical designs and drawings, but we also do a lot of energy modeling and energy calculation. And we do a lot of that surrounding electric vehicles now, with customers wanting to make sure that their solar array can, produce enough energy to offset the carbon of driving their car, and making that sort of a carbon zero footprint. From a business standpoint, we have an electric Volkswagen Golf that we drive basically for free. We generated in excess of 13,000 kilowatt hours last year that we basically donated back to the utility. So that's one of the areas where solar and electric vehicle charging can make a lot of sense, is where you can sort of drive your electric vehicle at no cost from that standpoint. Obviously the solar cost, but it's really just a great mix. And we're installing electric vehicle charging stations on probably 80% of the installations that we do. So spent a lot of time working around electric vehicles and that infrastructure. Thanks for having me. Good to see all the participants.
Yeah, of course, it's exciting to see see some of that shift. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I want to make sure with this panel, Mike hinted towards it, but some of the benefit here and why we're talking about it is that each individually, these are interesting things that businesses and individuals can be maybe initially drawn to, either solar on the roof or an EV in the garage or the driveway of your home or business. Can be each kind of, we'll have different people drawn to them, but there's some sort of special sauce of once the two are combined together, like Mike mentioned, of being able to drive on sunshine, the title of the presentation, and especially when it comes to cost. So one of the questions that I have for all of you is, which came first for you? It was kind of hinted in a couple of places, but did the solar or the EV come first for all of you? I think I know the answer, but I want you all to have an opportunity to answer yourselves. Bruce, we can go in the same order.
Okay, sure. Well, in our case, it was the solar that came first, because the construction of the house was intended to be a zero energy house. And the fact that we had this extra energy left over at the end of each year was kind of the icing on the cake. It was the pleasant surprise that allowed us to start thinking about ways to get the most benefit from that electricity that we were generating. And like Mike said, if you don't use it, it goes back to the utility, which isn't a bad thing, but you know, you really don't get any credit for it. So that's how it came about for us.
Henry, do you want to clarify a little bit more with with Pine Mountain Sports?
Sure. Well, so Pine Mountain Sports, for those of you just joining us, we're a mountain bike and ski shop over on the west side of Bend. It was, I think, 2015 when we first added the solar to the building. So for us, solar came first, and then pretty quickly afterwards, we added an electric vehicle and then 2 electric charging stations out in front of our store that are run off of our solar grid. In our case, our solar panels do not create enough electricity to cover all of our electricity that we use at the store. It's a pretty big retail store, and between air conditioning and just our square footage, it doesn't quite cover it, but it's motivating because as soon as you start recognizing how much electricity you're using, how much electricity you're saving via your solar panels, pretty quickly over the years, we started adding things like LED light bulbs, more efficient heating and cooling at the store, you know, because our goal is to ultimately have the solar panels cover more and more of our power needs at the store. Solar panels came first, and then with that, we have been heavily motivated to make the most of that solar.
Mike, as a solar company, I think we know the answer to your question, but do you want to answer as well?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on year 21 in the solar industry, long before electric vehicles were kind of something that was, you know, as mainstream as it is now. In fact, a cute story is we had a customer back in about 2005 that kept adding to his solar array, thinking that he was going to be able to charge this little electric truck that he had built. And after about a year, maybe year and a half of trying, you just realized that the infrastructure was not really set up to make that work. But it's kind of fun to look back and think about Greg trying to run that electric car when now it's such a mainstream thing where you can drive an electric vehicle and plug it in at Fred Meyer or somebody's office complex. It's just really amazing to me where we've come in 20 years, and certainly the last 5 in electric vehicles has been pretty exciting. So that's kind of our story.
Yeah, I love that. One of my first introductions to an electric vehicle was similar. I was going to school up in Bellingham, and I had a neighbor that had an old like Ford Ranger pickup truck that he converted to electric, and I remember talking to him about it, and he had solar on his roof, and he built the electric pickup truck. And I was looking inside of it, and I was talking to him, and I was like, "What's that hair dryer on your dash for?" And he said, "Well, the car has lots of electricity, but not a lot of waste heat. And so it's really hard to defrost the windshield in the morning." So he had wired in a hair dryer on a little like cell phone stand faced at the windshield, and that was his defrost in his DIY electric truck, which is pretty cool. Still waiting on some of those better options now, but okay.
That
we'll
sounds
go ahead.
like my old Volkswagen. It had lots of heat in the summertime, but none in the winter.
Great. Okay, so I've seen a couple things come up from the participant side. So if you're watching this either on Facebook Live or on Zoom, we do have the ability to unmute people. If they want to ask a question, you can raise your hand. But you can also ask your question in the chat box. So if you want to open that up, Lindsay just posted a note in there about the land acknowledgement, but if anybody wants to go in there and ask any questions, we'll be sure to take advantage of this panel and all their expertise and share those questions with the group. So we'll go ahead and as folks kind of on all ends, putting solar on your business in Bend, having an EV shop car, running a solar company, you get asked a lot of questions from different community members. So I wanted to see what some of the top questions that you all get about solar and having an EV at your building. Anybody can go.
Well, one of the questions is how many solar panels does it take to power a car? And I think that really is, the answer is it depends on how many miles you drive and how efficient the car is. So one of the things that we've done, I wrote a blog post for Zero Energy Project a few months ago where I try to lay out all that detail. I can't repeat all the details right now, but if you go to zeroenergyproject.org, you can see that blog post. And essentially it comes down to thinking about how many miles you drive and how many kilowatt hours it takes to drive each mile. And that's information that you can get off of public sources. If you already own an EV, the number of kilowatt hours that it takes to drive a mile is right on your dash. So you can kind of read that off the dash and see how many solar, kind of work backwards from it. Somebody like Mike can help you understand how many solar panels you'll need in order to generate that much electricity then. But in the article, I gave some rules of thumb about how much electricity we're getting in our panels. Of course, our system is about 5 years old now, and so the energy density of solar panels has increased quite a lot since then. So you'll have to look at current technology to see how many kilowatt hours each panel is going to produce over the course of a year. So I think that's one of the things to kind of start with is, in our case, it's only 4 or 5 panels, but then we only put maybe 4,000 or 5,000 miles on the car in a year. So it's not like we're using it, like Henry's family is for a daily commuter. That would obviously require a lot more.
I'd be curious, this is actually a question for Mike. A lot of times when talking to people about charging an electric car from home, whether it's on solar or otherwise, Mike, can you give us some examples of how much electricity an electric car, so let's say like my wife's Nissan Leaf, uses when it's plugged in for, let's say overnight, compared to, let's say, my hot tub that hasn't been turned off in 6 years? Can you give us an example of, I'm always sort of curious, like I know that like probably at peak moments, a tea kettle or a microwave uses a lot of electricity, but it's only on for a few moments. Can you give us some examples of how much electricity a car uses versus common appliances?
Sure. So there's two answers within that. There's the instantaneous output or the instantaneous draw that the car charger is taking to charge the car, and then its energy over time is how many miles are you recharging. So most electric cars on average go about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. So if you drive, as an example, 8,000 miles a year, you need to replace that 8,000 miles with, if you're looking to replace it with solar electricity, you'd want to have roughly 8,000 kilowatt hours, or I'm sorry, 8,000 divided by 4 would be 2,000 kilowatt hours to drive that electric vehicle 8,000 miles a year. So across the board, all the cars we look at, whether it's the Teslas or the Golfs or the Nissans, if you drive extremely carefully, you can get 4.5 miles per kilowatt hour. And if you like to really stomp on it and not drive it real careful, it's 3.5 to 3.8 miles per kilowatt hour. So when you get home at night, if you've driven, say you've driven 40 miles, and now you want to replace those kilowatt hours, you can divide that by the ratio of how many kilowatt hours the solar needs to make. And then what we look at is based on the tilt and orientation and the amount of solar needed, we can tell somebody pretty accurately how much solar we would need to be able to power that electric vehicle. Of course, we do that on top of home consumption as well. But speaking specifically of cars, that's how we look at that equation.
And then so for comparison though, how much electricity does a hot tub use when it's on and circulating for 8 hours?
Yeah, I think that we would use an equation of most electric hot tubs will be about 8 kilowatt hours today if they're newer. Older ones could be 12 to even 15 kilowatt hours a day. So that's been one of the things that we've looked at a lot over the years, especially folks who are wanting to run electric hot tubs off the grid, which is kind of a pretty impractical thing to want to do. So yeah, 8 to 15 is a pretty good number for hot tubs.
That's great. It's an interesting shift that I kind of wanted to hop into as well with Mike, where seems like everybody in this group, at least speaking from Pine Mountain, started with solar and then has jumped into EVs. I know that a lot of people, once they buy an EV or if they're interested in an EV, one of the next questions is, where does my power come from? And they then become interested in solar. So I'm kind of curious, Mike, if you mentioned over the past 5 years with EVs kind of growing up and filling their shoes, how that's changed, at least the customers that have reached out to E2, how the customers have changed in terms of how they're looking at either a potential EV or coming with an EV to solar.
Yeah, it just seems like almost every potential customer that we talk to, that's part of the equation. They're either asking us or we're proactively bringing it up, thinking about the cost of adding on to solar in the future versus the cost of putting it up while you're doing it. There's quite a bit of economy of scale in putting in that excess power, which in turn I think is driving people to move to electric vehicles sooner. So for example, the job site we're on today, we installed an electric vehicle outlet, a 40 amp outlet for this particular customer. They don't have an electric car yet, but it's very, very likely now that with that outlet sitting there that they see every day unused, they'll probably race out and buy an electric car fairly rapidly because they've got a solar array that's size now large enough for both the home and a potential electric car.
Yeah, that's great. I personally, we just had our panel replaced at our new house in Bend, and I had the electrician here because I've helped a lot of folks install charging, and I've had to have charging installed at the environmental center twice, and know how challenging it is to just add that additional. A small project is a big deal in terms of getting an electrician in Central Oregon. So I had a really easy location and just wired that in right away, and it definitely weighs on me so much more now that I see that unused outlet sitting there. It's just I guess I need to get an EV now, but I think that is big, and it's exciting. I think, Mike, you get to deal with some pretty excited customers that are thinking about the future with their home or business if they're putting solar on. So that makes sense that they're thinking about both of those at the same time. So we're gonna oh, go ahead, Henry.
Oh, I was just gonna throw in an observation from both a consumer and then also something that we kind of discovered at Pine Mountain Sports. Is I know that in the big picture, it's pretty awesome to look at a scenario where you're installing solar on your home, and then that solar is then feeding a charging station in your garage, and then that turns into an electric car. The systems are getting more and more affordable, and there's all kinds of reasons to go solar, especially if you can power your car with it. But I guess, on the flip side of that, I know that for me as when we were first looking at this, at the time we were renting. And so regardless of the cost of installing either solar or a charging station in the garage, ultimately it was just plugging our Nissan Leaf into a 110 outlet. And a lot of folks are looking at all these different choices and sometimes may put off, this electric car purchase until the solar happens, or feeling like the solar needs to wait and, until they can also plan out their charging station in their garage, or, do they want to run 240 in the garage? All of these things are nice to have, but I will put in a plug that you can get started right now. You can get your electric car today. You can plug it into a 110 outlet in your garage, and while it charges more slowly, as long as you sleep 10 hours a night, it is probably going to work just fine for you when you get up each day to be able to drive that car. And so I know I have a lot of conversations with folks who are like, well, we're thinking about getting the car, but we don't have the solar yet, or we're thinking about, doing the car, but we don't have the charging station yet. All of those things are awesome to have, but you can pick any one of those things and get started, and including just being able to plug your car into an outlet overnight. My wife's been doing a commute to Redmond every day for 6 years, and we still only charge it with 110 at home, and so that keeps up with her 40-mile-a-day commute with almost without exception, and it's easily done.
Yeah, thanks so much
Henry,
for pointing that out.
can she charge it?
Go ahead, Bruce.
I'm sorry, Henry, can she charge at work?
So my wife is a school teacher in Redmond. And so she does not have a charging station at her school, but her school is very close to the Fred Meyers in Redmond. So on occasion, where if she does find herself needing to top the car off, she can stop, she'll stop at the Redmond Fred Meyers for groceries on her way back to Bend to top the car off and come back. But I would say 95% of the time that never happens. She just charges at home. She gets 55 miles on her 2013 Leaf on a full night's sleep, and so it does a pretty good job of keeping up just with the 110. There are exceptions to that where whatever an airport run has to happen early in the morning, and then she comes back to Bend and then has to go to Redmond again, or maybe the electricity goes out, or maybe she forgot to plug in the car, which if you do that once or twice real quick, you'll remember to always plug it in. But in those scenarios, all is not lost because there's plenty of charging stations around town where you can, if needed, you can stop off for that quicker charge.
That's great. And I think that's another tool in the toolbox, that there are faster charging options that can be used on occasion. But yeah, level 1 is where most EV drivers start, and it's a surprisingly large number of drivers. Close to half of all EV drivers still just plug in with the regular 110 outlet because it's plenty of power for daily driving. Yeah, and then some of those other things that can boost it, like Bruce said, is access to charging of any speed at work can double both the range and the amount of charging you can get done in a day, which is pretty great. So we're going to hop to a couple of questions from the audience. I'm going to try to answer. Just a general question that came up, Mike, is just what the kind of suite of current incentives are for solar panels on a residential house. And you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, now I'm unmuted. The federal tax credit for a solar installation is 26%. That will be currently scheduled to drop to 22% for 2021. For customers that are in Pacific Power territory or over in PG territory in Portland, there is still the Energy Trust of Oregon, which has been around for something like, I want to say 18 years now. So the Energy Trust incentive varies. Currently, it's sitting around 30 cents a watt. Oregon did pass an incentive program for last year, but due to the budgetary constraints caused by COVID, we're not sure where we're going to fall with the incentive program for the Oregon rebate next year. It's very, very likely that will be reduced or possibly even be zero for next year. We're just not 100% sure yet what that looks like, but we still have its federal tax credit. We still have the Energy Trust of Oregon for incentives and rebates.
That's great. And then I think a similar question that was asked by Suzanne, who's on the call, was around payback. And I want to kind of shift this question a little bit, because from everything that I heard from all of you and from most drivers, there's questions about a lot of different priorities and the kind of the why of when you're doing solar and when you're doing choosing an electric vehicle. Some of those can be financial, some of those can be environmental, some of them can, there's a lot of motivations that are out there. But just speaking to that financial piece, I was wondering if anybody wanted to make some comments on either end of the solar, EV, or combined for how that works out financially for folks, or what are their motivations?
I can take the first crack at it. You guys can, fill in something if I miss it or if you disagree with how I look at it. But I saw the question come through, and the question was phrased as, "What's the payback?" And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, is that when people talk about payback, the assumption is that the benefits come sometime in the future. And I think it's important to recognize that if you structure this properly, you can achieve, immediate economic benefits. And in fact, all the benefits come to you immediately from either, driving an electric vehicle or from having a zero energy house or a house that's very energy efficient. And so the way to look at it really is, where am I getting the money to do this? Let's say that you borrowed it. And in our case, in our house, we ended up spending about $38,000 to make our house a zero energy house. That sounds like a lot of money, but we stretched that out over a 30-year mortgage. And what that meant was that we spent about $90 a month to finance that cost. But I'm sorry, it was $90, about $90 a month to finance that cost. And yet we get $100 a month worth of benefits in savings. So we essentially made an investment of $90 and we're getting a return of $100. That meant that we're basically cash flow positive the minute we walked in the door. So I think you really need to kind of analyze this a little bit more carefully than just saying, when is it going to pay off? If you were to buy a stock or a bond, you wouldn't ask, when is it going to pay for itself? You'd ask, is your investment paying off before, when are you making more money each month than you're spending? And people that are in business understand this, because you make an investment, you might borrow money from a bank and you buy something that's going to make your business more profitable. You take a portion of those profits, you pay off the loan, and then if you're a good business person, you have something left over, right? There's a little bit left over, and that's called the profit that you get to put in your pocket. So when you analyze these expenses for for energy improvements or for EVs or for solar panels, look at it as an investment where you're putting down you're incurring some kind of a monthly cost, but you're also getting a monthly benefit. And the key to making this work out is to take that first cost and spread it out over as many months as you possibly can. And that's why a mortgage is the perfect way to do this, because you've got a 30-year mortgage. That makes the monthly costs very low compared to a home improvement loan that might only go for 8 or 10 years or something like that. So if you can stretch the costs out over a long period of time, you can bring it down to where any of these investments actually pay you back. They don't cost you anything. They pay for themselves and then have a little bit left over.
That's good. I'll throw in a basic answer to that too on two levels. One in regards to the solar. So at Pine Mountain Sports, I think we've had our solar array on the roof for about 6 years now. And for us, it's been saving us, when you have a $500 a month electric bill, at a big retail store, and your solar largely takes care of that. I think that in our 6 years, I think that our solar array costs on that, we've pretty much recouped that just in terms of with our money that we saved on our electric bill over the course of each month and each year. And so now that the solar is largely recouped, the cost of that, that is obviously money in the bank each month. Yeah, so free money, we like that. But then also keeping in mind that we own our building, and so adding solar to our building, I mean, we've basically increased the value of our building immediately by adding solar to that. So in any future purchaser of our building or our business, for example, would be stoked that, well, they're not going to have electric bills in the future and that solar array is already there. So in some ways, really it was just, investing in our own building. And so that money was immediately, the money that we spent on it, I think was almost immediately recognized in the value of the building. And then also just on a basic level at the other end of the spectrum, in terms of, hey, if I put this money into an electric car, how quickly can I recoup that? And so like on a basic level, I was mentioned, my wife has a commute from Bend to Redmond. The amount of money that she used to spend just on gas to put in her Volvo to drive those 40 to 50 miles every day more than covered the cost of her monthly car payment on her used 2013 Nissan Leaf that she bought that plugs in and charges for next to nothing. It also has, in the last 5 or 6 years of her doing that commute and owning that car, I think our total cost of maintenance on that car, not including snow tires and wiper blades, for like 6 years worth of car maintenance, we might have spent $400 on it. It's the most maintenance-free car we've ever had. So from that first month, immediately with that electric car, we were basically saving money, you know, not just on cost of maintenance, you know, and on our old gas-powered Volvo, but immediately, you know, the amount of money that we were saving on gas was literally paying the entire car payment on our electric car.
That's great. So I wanted to answer, there's a couple of other questions that came up around how to charge, charging stations, and affordability for low income. So I wanted to touch on a couple of those things. I'm going to do a quick swap and show a couple of quick slides to talk about the incentives and affordability around EVs. So the questions that came up around charging, just taking a step back, most folks, individuals that are buying EVs are charging at home. Like Henry said, that's either with a regular wall outlet or that's getting that 240 volt plug installed, like Mike mentioned, as another option. That's where most charging happens, but then there's also charging that does happen in and around the community, whether that's at work or at community charging spots like at Pine Mountain Sports, or Henry lives next to a Pacific Power charger that has a couple of different fast charging options that's right in downtown Bend. There's some really good tools for being able to find that, and then answering the question of if it costs to charge totally depends on where you're at. A lot of employers choose to make it free as a workplace perk, and some places have a period that's free, like Pine Mountain Sports, where you can come and charge for an hour, come and check out the shop, and then beyond that, they'll charge you for kind of the extended charging. I'm going to try to breeze through this really quick. Those are those different types of chargers, and there's a lot more of them that we see coming through. So, but I really wanted to hop into the rebate that's available in Oregon. There's 3 different pots of money that are available for electric vehicles. They can provide up to $12,500. And so this is the overview that the slide that I wanted to get to. In the state of Oregon, whether you are a business, a nonprofit, a government agency, or an individual, as long as that car is registered in Oregon, you can be eligible for a $2,500 state rebate off of the purchase or lease of a new electric vehicle. So that's a really awesome chunk. The next is the charge ahead rebate, and that one's specifically addressing the question about low income and affordability. So if you can look at these resources on our website, but you can put in a calculator and find if you qualify, but it's a pretty moderate income. The majority of people in any area will qualify for this in the moderate income, low to moderate income, and that's an additional $2,500. There's also a federal tax credit. So there's a lot of money that's out there, and I'd be happy to walk through with anybody that's interested. But the really cool thing on the affordability front here is that we're really at a point now where used electric vehicles are much easier to find, and a used EV is eligible for this state $2,500 charge ahead rebate. So if you're a low or moderate income household, you can get a used EV for around $10,000, and then get a $2,500 rebate on it. So that can really start to pay off really quickly. There's a lot more details that I'd be happy to go into with folks afterwards. So neil@envirocenter.org, and I would be happy to dive into more details, but don't want to go through too many numbers during a presentation. Otherwise, we'll see all the participants start dropping off. Okay, so I'm going to head back to a couple of questions that are still here. A lot has changed, not just figuratively with things happening in 2020, but just technology-wise, in the time since Pine put solar on their roof, in the time since E2 started getting involved with off-grid solar, and since even when you all built your house, Bruce. If you were getting started right now, and either as an individual or a business, and didn't know what to do, knowing what you all know now, where would you start on this journey?
That's a good question. I think Henry made a good point that you can almost start anywhere. You know, if you're in an existing house, then maybe, you know, the first thing to do is to buy an electric vehicle, because in that case, you're going to spend less to own and operate that electric vehicle than you would a gasoline powered car. So, you know, that's immediate benefit to you right now. And then if you're building a new house, I would basically make that house a zero energy or a positive energy house by making sure it's as efficient as possible, and then putting on the extra solar panels to you know, capture the savings from electric vehicle down the road. So I think depending on where your life situation is, you have a number of different places that you can kind of get on board.
Similarly, looking to the future, seeing where you see technology going, where do you think we're going to be in 5 or 10 years, and how do you think the equation is going to change on either of these fronts? You can dive as deep as you want to, but where do you see EVs and solar fitting into people's lives in 5 or 10 years?
I think Mike should take that one.
I think that electric vehicles are going to be something that people are realizing can be their daily driver. I think there used to be a lot of range anxiety and things like that, but the technology with batteries especially is changing pretty quick to where, you know, it's not at all unheard of for an electric vehicle to go 250 miles. You know, some of the newer Neros or Kia cars, it doesn't have to be a Tesla. You know, there are some long range vehicles that really cost about the same as anybody else's gasoline engine. And when people start getting over that range anxiety part of it, I think that we'll really see electric vehicles take off. There are certainly different population areas where electric vehicles make more sense based on the infrastructure. We see Central Oregon as an ideal place for electric vehicles because you can go to the mountain, you can go out for a hike someplace that's, you know, out for a couple hours away and still have enough range to get back home. So, you know, I just think electric vehicles, it's just really pretty amazing how fast it's going. And to think where we're going to be at in 5 years for me is a little difficult, because I used to look back 20 years ago, 15 years ago, and try to figure out what a megawatt of solar was, and try to do the math of how many zeros that was. It's really amazing where things have come in, you know, 15 or 20 years. And right now it just seems like everything is happening extremely quickly, and it's pretty exciting. It's very exciting.
Now, I think the other thing that will happen in the next year, by the end of 2021, you're going to be able to buy a pickup truck that's got a 400-mile range and will tow a 10,000-pound trailer. I don't think it'll tow a 10,000-pound trailer 400 miles, but it is going to be a pickup truck that has a fairly good capacity off-road. It's going to really break open the whole electric vehicle space. And at the same time, solar technology is actually marching, you know, closer and closer and closer. I mean, the prices are going to drop, you know, even more from when they are now. So, you know, I think it's one of those things where, you know, there's never a bad time to jump into this.
Agreed. It's very, very exciting. When there is an electric pickup, that will be my daily driver, because it's hard to haul goat food and chicken food and hay and grass in a Volkswagen Golf. So looking forward to the electric pickup.
Well, and that electric pickup's also going to let you plug in all of your power tools, you know, in the bed of the pickup truck. You know, you'll be able to run your circular saw and everything else right out of the bed of the truck.
Hey, yeah. Somebody's been watching the Nikola ads.
That's something I'm really excited
Super
about
cool.
too. being in Central Oregon is that we have a really awesome advantage when it comes to these things, that there's enough early adopters where we can learn from them too. So that's what we're trying to do at the Environmental Center, is get those people and be able to amplify their message. So when those cool new vehicles come out, I know Henry with the Bend Electric Vehicle Club and myself will be knocking down their door and trying to get them in front of as many people as possible. We have a couple, I'm gonna maybe be able to get to 2 more questions, and then we have some wrap up slides to be able to introduce everybody to some of the other events going on this week. Mike, well, one of the questions was around, let me see if I capture all of the pieces of it. How battery storage currently can fit into the solar and EV space.
Well, certainly we talked about using solar to offset energy being used to drive a car, and some of the equations on how many kilowatt hours it takes to do that. I think the next sort of step that we're going to see, and iterations that we're starting to see in Europe, where a lot of the stuff is taking shape ahead of the US, is being able to use the really large battery banks that are in vehicles to be a battery bank that not only runs the vehicle, but can potentially run the house, support the grid, provide backup power. There's already some of this being done in Europe, where you can plug your car in at night, and rather than your car being charged by the house, the system is smart enough to know that tomorrow's commute is only 40 miles, and you've got 200 miles worth of electricity in your car. You might as well use some of the electricity in your home and not buy it from the power grid, certainly during times of the day when electricity is more expensive than others. So, you know, where the battery connections and technology go, it's we're really just scratching the surface of having discussions about those kinds of things. But I think that's ultimately where we're going to go. And I've said this for a lot of years. At some point, the utility is going to become a secondary power source, and they're going to wake up one day and realize, like, oh, what happened to all of our customers? We didn't value what solar had to offer back then, and now the utilities are kind of getting left behind by our technology. And to me, that's, as somebody who's lived off the grid now for almost 21 years, to me, that's sort of the ultimate, I don't want to call it a payback, but that's sort of for what the utilities have not been valuing solar all these years. Someday they're going to wake up and realize that they weren't quite as important as they thought they were, at least on a residential basis. Certainly on a commercial basis, that's a lot harder. But that's some of the stuff I think is really super cool and exciting to talk about.
Yeah, I've seen some really cool applications of this where when you start digging into infrastructure with more and more electric vehicles, maybe one cool example is at a park and ride for a bus. So there's a couple of challenges with that in providing enough power for multiple vehicles to be charging, and then for a bus to come by and ramp up this crazy, like 750 kilowatt charger. And you know, what I've seen some folks that are new to this, or some engineers that are new to this, being kind of overwhelmed by how that's going to impact the grid. We can see a future, and the future is now in some other more progressive countries, where they have enough electric vehicles plugged in that when that bus comes, they just ramp down that charging. They don't even, you know, pull from those batteries. They just ramp down that charging, ramp up the bus charging, and then go back, so they have a consistent load all day. So there's a lot of really cool future opportunities. Maybe that'll be a future event for us, just talking about all the exciting new things coming. One more quick question, and I'm going to have Henry answer, and then we're going to go to the final slides. Somebody just asked about EVs in the snow. Curious your take on or how you'd answer that question.
Denise, good question. For a long time, I think when we, years ago when we were thinking about getting an electric car, that was, living in Bend, that was one of our main concerns. And I would say that the short answer is that the electric car has actually completely spoiled us for winter driving compared to all of the other options. So here's, after 6 years of electric car ownership in Bend and driving through all kinds of winters, as I mentioned before, my wife drives our electric car from Bend to Redmond and back every day. She's a school teacher, so unless it snows so much that they cancel school, the Leaf is driving to Redmond in the snow. I'm also a big skier, and so I drive it up to Mount Bachelor and drive it up to the Meisner Nordic Trails all winter long. It actually does very well in the snow. A few things to keep in mind. One is, like with any car, you want to have some good winter tires. So some good siped, S-I-P-E-D, siped winter traction tires, which is just a modern winter tire that has little cuts in it that is really grippy in the snow. And then also just paying attention as to whether that electric car is front wheel drive or wheel wheel drive. There are some rear wheel drive electric cars like the BMW i3, which arguably don't do quite as well in the snow as a lot of front wheel drive electric cars like our Nissan Leaf. The other nice thing about driving it in the winter is that it has heated seats and a heated steering wheel. Our 2013 Nissan Leaf even has heated back seats. I can remote start the electric car with my cell phone. So if I'm, coming out of a restaurant late at night and the car's parked outside and it's super cold, I can preheat it just by turning on my phone. So I don't have to come back to a cold car. In the morning, before my wife's leaving the house, I can use that same cell phone to remote start the car in the garage, and that car is heated up even before it leaves the garage. And because there's no emissions, you don't even have to open the garage door. So you can go down into a closed garage and get into a warm, toasty car. The other thing that's kind of interesting about electric cars versus gas-powered cars is we used to have a Volvo hatchback that was our daily driver before we got the Nissan Leaf, is just in the 2 or 3 miles that I would drive it, let's say driving it to work in the morning, when it was super cold outside, even pulling it out of my garage, by the time I got to work, which is about 3 miles away, the car was just starting to actually heat up and blow hot air out of the heater. Whereas the electric car generates that heat much more quickly. That car is blowing warm air out, by the time I get to the end of my block. So it creates the heat differently for the heater, but it also heats up much more quickly. And when that car is sitting, so when I go up to Mount Bachelor to ski and I'm sitting there in the car putting my ski boots on, or around at the back of the hatchback, digging my stuff out while the car's running and the heater's on, there's no emissions, no exhaust that's coming into the car. So all of those things have actually completely ruined me for winter driving in gas-powered cars. So I would say the short answer is, not only is it pretty darn good, but in so many different ways, I actually think it's far superior winter car compared to a gas-powered car.
That's awesome, Henry. Thanks for that. So Lindsay, I think she's gonna hop in here and share her screen for some final wrap-up slides. And two points as she's getting that up. One, like she said in the chat, there's some questions that were asked that we weren't able to get to. And I will be happy to follow up via email to answer those questions. And then a second one, just like Bruce and Henry said, I've heard this a number of times, and I really, really like this answer to the question of what to do next. The most important thing to do is something. And with all of these things, everyone's individual situation is different. And doing something really can start a snowball of making these changes that are really positive. So that's why we're here with the Green Tour, to help give you some ideas and guidance through this. And I think Lindsay's going to hop in now. I think she's unmuted to wrap things up. Or maybe, are you there, Lindsay?
I am, sorry,
Okay.
Technology got the best of me there for a second. All right, thank you all for being here today. I really enjoyed your questions and getting to hear some more insight from all of these awesome EV enthusiasts. So like we mentioned before, we have 6 more events coming at you this week to engage. You'll see some of these faces again later. As you can see here, they're all experts on a lot of really fun topics. Another really cool opportunity this week is that you will actually be able to visit one site in person. It's not our normal green tour, but Core Community Land Trust is going to be opening up their site that's under construction on Saturday, September 26th. You do still need to sign up in advance, because they don't want to have too many people on site at the same time. But you'll be able to see what they're up to at their new development on Hewit Place. You'll also be able to explore this site a little bit when we release their virtual tour here in the next couple of days. And so don't forget, there are more sites to explore. That'll include core sites, some really awesome retrofits where we'll talk about what it takes to go solar on an existing home, some zero energy discussions, talking about how we get to zero in new construction, and all sorts of other fun topics. So we hope to be able to see you some more in the very near future, if not in a couple of hours. All right, thank you, everybody.
Hey,
Great,
I'll put in a plug real quick before we go. For those of you that are either electric vehicle owners or considering electric vehicle ownership in Central Oregon, there is a Facebook group called the Bend Electric Vehicle Club. So if you're a Facebook user, if you haven't already, you should go to that group and request membership of that group. Especially if you have questions about winter driving or, you know, how certain cars work in Central Oregon. I think there's about, gosh, I think we have 80+ members now. So you've got largely about 80 different people that are driving electric vehicles in Central Oregon on a regular basis. And so it's a great place to get some of those questions answered. And then putting on my Pine Mountain Sports hat, if you have any questions about our solar array or our electric vehicle charging station or electric shop car at Pine Mountain Sports, you can find me at the store, or you can email me, Henry, Henry, at pinemountainsports.com if you have any questions related to that.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll email out contact information if you have questions of the panelists or want to dive in deeper on any of these pieces. And we hope to see you tonight at 5 at our next panel, and then on at future stops on the 2020 Virtual Green Tour. Thanks, everybody.
Right on. Thank you, guys. Mike, Bruce, it was super nice to meet you. Thanks for jumping on the call with us.
You as well, Henry. Thanks. Great. Take care.